All right, let's get right into it. We're going to break down this incredible lecture Swami Vivekananda gave when he returned to India. He called it his plan of campaign. And believe me, it wasn't just a speech. It was basically a blueprint for resurrecting the entire spirit of a nation.
So Vivekananda comes back from the West and he finds a country that's not just under foreign rule, but is suffering from a deep, deep psychological sickness. He saw this massive crisis of confidence, a weakness that came from centuries of being told over and over that they were worthless. So that's the big question, right? How do you fix that? And his answer, his whole approach, was just so radical because it had nothing to do with politics or economics. He went straight for the heart of the national psyche. Okay, so first up, let's look at his diagnosis. He argued that the root cause of India's problems wasn't material at all. It was a sickness of the mind and the spirit. He saw people who had been beaten down so much that they actually started to believe they were nothing. They were frightened, they were weakened, and they'd never been taught about the incredible power they held within themselves, the Atman, the divine self. And this weakness, he said, led them to grasp at straws, to turn to what he called creepy things, these weakening kinds of mysticism and strange beliefs, all because they were desperately looking for power outside of themselves, convinced they had none inside. So, how did he come up with such a sharp, insightful diagnosis? Well, it wasn't overnight. It was forged over a long journey that really had three distinct phases. First, he had his time with his master, Sri Ramakrishna, where he got this incredibly deep spiritual foundation. Then, he literally walked the length and breadth of India as a poor monk, and he saw firsthand the real problems and the real potential of his people. And finally, his time in the West gave him this unique perspective. It let him compare civilizations and see what gave the West its power, but also what it was missing spiritually. Each part of that journey gave him a crucial piece of the puzzle. And this is where it gets really interesting. Because through all of this, he pinpointed the one key ingredient, the single psychological element that India had lost, but the West seemed to have. He said the core difference was just this. The Englishman believes in himself. He's taught that just by being an Englishman, he can do anything. And that powerful belief, Vivekananda said, is what brings out the God within. Meanwhile, the Indian had been told for ages that he was nothing. And so, tragically, that's what he'd become, powerless. He gave this missing ingredient a name, Atma Shraddha. Now, this is way more than just self-confidence. It's a combination of Atman, which is that eternal divine self that's in every single one of us, and Shraddha, which means faith. So it's this unshakable faith in the infinite divine power that's already inside you. That's a totally fair question, right? And it's one Vivekananda tackled head on. He drew a really, really sharp line between the kind of ego that comes from weakness and arrogance and the kind of profound strength that comes from truly knowing yourself. He explained that arrogance is born from a cycle of weakness. See, it all starts with ignorance, with this false idea that I am just this little body. That mistake creates ego, competition, division, and it all ends in the ultimate fear, the fear of death, because you think you're this thing that's going to die. But Atma Shraddha? Well, that kicks off a completely different cycle, a virtuous one. Believing I am the divine self naturally leads you to things like discipline, compassion for others because they have that same self, and eventually to real self-knowledge. It's the polar opposite of arrogance. It's the foundation of unity and real peace. So, we have the diagnosis and we have the prescription. Now, how do you actually apply this? His idea was to take this ancient philosophy, Vedanta, and apply it directly to public life. And he made this brilliant distinction. He said, look, there's Dvaita, or dualism. It's all about devotion, surrendering to God. And that's beautiful for your personal spiritual life. But, and this is a huge but, if you apply that same feeling of helplessness to national life, it's a disaster. For the nation, he prescribed Advaita, non-dualism, the bold, empowering truth that the divine isn't separate from you, it is you. And this quote just nails it perfectly. The humility of I am nothing, you are everything is for your prayer room. But when you face the world, when you face a challenge, you have to bring out the strength that comes from that Advaitic truth, I am that. So this philosophy wasn't just some abstract idea. No way. It became the engine for his practical, world-changing mission. He didn't want these ideas stuck in old books. He called for a man-making religion, man-making theories, man-making education.
The goal of every single institution, he said, should be focused on one thing: building character, forging strong, compassionate, self-reliant human beings.
You've probably heard his famous call for muscles of iron and nerves of steel. Now, it's easy to misunderstand that as a call for aggression, but it wasn't about oppressing others. It was about developing immense inner strength, the strength to conquer your own demons and to serve humanity without ever getting tired.
I mean, can you feel the power in that? His message was this thunderous wake-up call. He was basically grabbing the nation by the shoulders and yelling, "Enough! Stop the weeping, stop the self-pity. It's time to stand up with dignity and self-respect." And to guide this whole mission, he gave everyone a dead simple, incredibly powerful tool. A kind of acid test you could use to evaluate any idea, any belief, anything. This was his ultimate filter. He said, forget about tradition, forget about what you've been told your whole life. Just ask yourself one simple question. Does this idea make you strong? Does it build you up? Or does it tear you down? That's it. That's all that matters. And there it is, his final, uncompromising standard. Truth, for him, had to be strengthening. It had to be life-giving. Anything else, no matter how sacred it seems, is poison. It has no life in it, he said, so it can't be true. For Vivekananda, truth and strength were basically the same thing. And that really leaves us with a pretty challenging question, doesn't it? If we actually applied that acid test to our own lives, to the stories we tell ourselves, the beliefs we hold, what would we find? What ideas are actually making us stronger, and which ones are just a subtle poison, holding us back from who we could really be? It's something to think about.